It's the How to Write Funny podcast. I'm Scott Dickers. Today I'm talking with Jermaine Affonso, the editor of Clickhole, which is spoken of widely as the funniest site on the internet. So what was the genesis of Clickhole?
Well, Clickhole was not my idea.
Okay.
Just to get that started with, Clickhole was the idea of, I think, just a bunch of people. It's kind of one of these things that bubbles over time. I think people have ideas at The Onion, and then they're like, that'd be cool. It'd be cool to have a clickbait parody site. And then, somehow you get the resources and people are interested in actually making it happen. And then it happens. And so then they approached me and they were like, would you like to be in charge of this website? And I said, yeah, sure. And then we put the staff together and we built what it was. But all we had to start with was a clickbait parody site.
So sometimes at The Onion, a fake site will show up because of a video mention of it or something in an article, and a little bit of effort will be put into creating some kind of fake world, which if it ever hit, then maybe they'd put more resources into that or whatever. And when I say they, I mean the business people at The Onion who decide how the money is spent. But Clickhole was different. You recognized that, hey, this could be a thing, and so you really put some resources into building it up before launching, or was there any sort of R&D or testing phase or anything?
So we did have on the Onion website, we started doing slideshows, which were like not a thing that The Onion, as you know, not a thing that The Onion did until I think 2012.
I was thinking those might have been partly
Yeah.
the genesis because they were tapping into this new type of media that hadn't been parodied.
Right, so we had like slideshows that were like 5 hot pictures of Rihanna from last night, and then you would just click through and it'd be pictures of cups. And then I think they started becoming a little more satirical. Like we had stuff that was 10 photos you have to see from last night's Golden Globes, or like the 10 best dresses.
And it was tragedies from around the world.
It was tragedies from around the world, like
Right.
atrocities, and the captions were like, "She looks stunning," and and I think those were really popular, and people really liked them. It tapped into something real, and so I think that also felt like, oh, we could build this out more. And in a certain degree, that doesn't really fit on The Onion. I mean, it does, but it kind of, for the hard news thing that The Onion is trying to satirize, it didn't exactly make sense.
Right. The New York Times doesn't really do clickbait slideshows.
Right.
Or, a major daily newspaper doesn't really do that.
Yeah, not exactly. It's more of a Huffington Post kind of thing. And so
Yeah.
it felt like we could spin this off
BuzzFeed.
and make it more real and kind of go after a
Right.
broader swath of sites.
One of my favorites, I think it was Best Places to Live.
Yes.
Do you remember that one? Where it escalated beautifully because it started with a town that you hadn't really heard of or something, and then it got more obscure until by the end it was inventing a whole alternate universe of places. Does that ring any bells?
Yeah, I think we just made up cities and stuff. Right?
Right,
We did
right.
that with like Mad Men too. We had the best Mad Men character, or what we're hoping to see on this season of Mad Men.
Sure.
Just made up characters and storylines.
Yeah, so despite this new form, like this new template for a piece, The Onion has various templates. This slideshow was new. Despite that, was there anything else about it that struck you? Like, what made it fresh for you? Was it the kind of humor that you were able to do, the kind of satire you were able to do, or is it simply the parody of that form?
Well, I think when you're starting a new website, you also don't want to just replicate The Onion's voice and do the exact same website. So what felt fresh is that, and exciting, was that we could make it kind of whatever we wanted it to be. And I feel like The Onion is, because it's parodying a hard news source, it's parodying the New York Times, the headlines are very straight, very objective in quotes.
Yeah.
I think whereas with Clickhole and clickbait culture, there's always a little bit of an attitude that comes through the internet. There's an opinion in the headline. No one hides how they're feeling. And so we could play with that. We could be perpetually excited about everything. And that's kind of what we went with. Clickhole is just excited no matter what the news story is. It's just an excited, crazy person.
Right, and you're also parodying that snarky voice that a lot of blogs and magazines use, which The Onion can't really do in its voice.
Right, yeah. It can
It's a
just
whole
do
new
more.
thing.
Yeah, I mean, The Onion would do a headline about BuzzFeed,
Sure.
and it would do a headline about internet culture and about bloggers. And I think there's even a headline someone wrote, it was like a blogger to go with sarcastic sensibility, and just like kept praising this blogger. But in Clickhole, you can kind of embody that and just construct this false identity that exists in the universe.
Right, it becomes a character almost.
Right.
Do you have ranges of voice in that character depending on the piece? Much like in The Onion, you can sort of tell a little difference between maybe a feature type story and a news story. Is there, now that Clickhole's been around more than a year now?
Yeah, a little over a year.
Yeah, so have you found that you can have these slightly different variations of that voice?
Definitely. I think it is constantly shifting with what the piece is. And also what we've started noticing is that it's like the speaker is shifting constantly. Sometimes we have someone that's talking that's like 10 snakes I could run over with my lawnmower. It's like, who is this guy that's speaking? Who's the I in this?
Right.
And then other times we're talking as we. The idea of the site is that it's kind of just content that's coming out of nowhere.
Right.
And we don't know where it's coming from. We
don't know where it's going.
We don't know
we don't know where you're going to end up.
Yeah, we don't know
Yeah.
what's happening, basically. It's like, it's just this website was created, content is being spontaneously generated, and it goes up on the site, which is kind of how it feels like a lot of websites run these days. It feels
Right.
like people just take things from everywhere, and they're like, click on this and read it on our website. Doesn't matter where we got it from.
Exactly, just click.
Yeah.
Just click.
Right.
And that's kind of, at first, the sort of marketing, I guess, for lack of a better word, of the site was all about clicking. How many clicks can you get? Click this, click this, click this. It was very overt. There's a little less of that now, it seems.
I think that's a great way to get people hooked into the site and
To tell them to click.
Yeah, tell them to click and tell them to so very clearly see what we're parodying. And to me, a lot of people call us like, the BuzzFeed parody site, and it's like we definitely see ourselves as so much more than that. And we parody a larger part of the internet and the world. But I think that if that's what you need to get into this site and then you can see the rest of it, that's totally fine. That's great.
Yeah, it's like The Onion, started as a parody of USA Today.
Right.
But then over time, it sort of started parodying all of journalism.
Yeah.
And Clickhole has the same potential, clearly. So let's take you back again to the genesis. Do you remember whose idea it was, or was it more a committee or
I
a
think
group idea?
it's a little bit more committee oriented, and some of it was also you want some like their business needs too. Like slideshows did really well, so it's like, how can we capitalize on that? We also want places to do kind of shorter form videos. How could that work? So yeah, I think it was like a kind of a group of people that came up with it.
Did they then go to the money guys and say, hey, we want to do this, or was it a little more?
Yeah. I think one person that was very vocal about it and like pushed the idea through was JJ Shabesta, who is the O&N creative director.
Yeah.
So he was definitely someone early on that was really passionate about that idea and made it happen.
And he's a great salesperson.
For sure. Yeah.
Among his other great qualities.
Yes.
And then when you said they came to you about editing it, who was they exactly?
I was approached definitely by Ben Berkeley, who is the
managing editor
of The Onion. Yes, at the time editorial coordinator. Because he was going to be involved in the early stages of the site, and we're working as the managing editor of that site as well, along with all of his stuff that he used to do in The Onion. And so he approached me directly, but I think it was from, with
He
the
had
blessing
conversations with the money people,
Right.
and some decisions had already been made to,
Right.
hey, let's explore this or
Right,
whatever.
right.
Great.
Yeah.
And at that time, were you senior writer at The Onion or head writer, or what was your
No, I was
job?
a senior writer, yes. I
Okay.
think that was my title. Yeah, I was doing a lot of video stuff and writing for the paper.
And you had been doing that for how long?
3 years at that point.
Okay.
I started in May 2011, and I was like a writing fellow then and kind of working.
Was that in New York?
That was in New York.
Okay.
Yeah, I wasn't full-time the first year, but at the time they were working on this book, the Encyclopedia Book of No Knowledge, and they just kind of needed a lot of help, so I was kind of just hanging around, doing a lot of writing.
As a writing fellow.
As a writing fellow for 3 months, and then after that, I was in the room and pitching jokes and working as a writer and stuff.
And for those who don't know, explain the Onion Writing Fellowship.
So it shifted a little bit from what it was, but when I did it, it was a 3-month thing that happened during the summer. Basically, I applied right out of college. You submit a packet of 25 Onion-style headlines, 3 short news and briefs, again in Onion voice, and then they kind of pick 2 people, I think at the time, to be one of the to be a writing fellow, and then you get to shadow the writers. You actually get to be a writer. You get to be in the room. You get to pitch show, which is an insane thing that they let you come in and just do that. It's weird, but
It's
no
like
other place.
full
would do it.
immersion.
Yeah, full immersion. It's great, and so you learn a lot, and you get to really I remember coming into the meeting the first day, and they were like, all right, you're in the writer's room, you're sitting at the big table, this is the process you heard about on This American Life, pitch your jokes. I was like, all right. It was horrifying.
And did you pitch your own jokes?
Yes, first day.
Really?
I read my own headlines out loud.
Really?
Yes.
Is that kind of a first day initiation thing they do? Because normally isn't it a big master list that somebody reads?
No, I think the headline process, true from The Onion, has kind of changed a little bit from then to now. But at the time, yeah, every writer would go around the room reading out their own headlines, which would be like 25, and then the room would either say it's either silent or that someone would go, sure, and someone else would go, yeah.
That's
And
about
then
the most you're ever going to get.
That's the most you're ever going to get. And, you'll get, if there gets like 2 of those, then you get to highlight it, then it goes onto a master list, and then it's discussed by everyone the next day. So
Yeah, the process used to be anonymous, and I wonder if it evolved into people reading it, because when you would compile the lists into one big list and have one person read it, you could tell whose ideas were whose anyway.
yeah.
So maybe they just figured, all right, we'll just have people
Yeah,
read
it's
their
also
headlines.
kind of fun. It's like the closest thing to like stand up in the job, where it's like you get to read your own headlines out loud, and you get to perform them a little bit, barely,
Right.
but you get to read your own joke out, and you get to put
Right.
the punch where you want it. And
But do you worry that somebody there selling the headline to a group is going to artificially inflate that joke? and make
I
it-
think that probably happens all the time, but then the way that's corrected is that the next day you get to look at them on a
You
list.
sleep on
blankly.
it, you look at it soberly.
Yeah,
and
and then
what were we
like,
thinking?
What were we thinking
Yeah,
with this
okay.
show? That happens all the time. I mean,
So you
yeah.
allow yourself some fun and some
Yeah.
yes-anding on that first day. Second day is a more sober.
Yeah, it
cut
can be
ruthlessly.
really fun. The headline means they can also be miserable when things aren't getting through. I mean, it's really tense and scary when you're reading things out and you're like, all right, it's been like 5 headlines now and no one has said yes.
Right,
So-
right. But there's an acceptance that everybody, even a genius comedy writer, most of what they produce is going to be garbage.
Totally.
Everybody knows that.
Yes,
Everybody
yes.
accepts that.
Yeah, it's a volume game.
Yeah, but most people, I mean, I assume most people in the Onion writers' room are over that.
Yes, 100%. I think after a couple, I don't care about other people think. You're like, all right, you don't like
Oh, yeah.
this joke. that's
Nobody
fine.
liked my ideas this week. Who cares? I'll
But
get
it's
them next
also
week.
what's almost worse than the rejection is sometimes what'll happen is some people will go, yeah, okay, sure, and you're like, all right, yeah, and then like
reluctant
people
approval.
will kind of approve it because they know it's been a while, and they'll go, all right, sure, yeah,
That's
give yourself a little highlight.
Right, right, right. Or worse, maybe they ask you, is everything okay, Jim?
Yeah, which happens all the time.
Yeah. So then the process of building Clickhole, what kind of changes did you make in the way you assessed writers who submitted, or where did you find writers? Where did you start looking for people straight away? Did you just grab from the Onion, or did you look outside immediately?
We had a lot of Onion contributors apply, just so they knew what the opportunity, because it was an opportunity. They'd done a lot of work. They've been loyal to the Onion for so long, some of them, and we were like, why not, let's give these people a shot and give them full-time jobs.
These were more junior people at the Onion.
Yes. These are the outside contributors,
Got
people
it.
that are
Freelance contributors.
freelance contributors.
who work
Yeah,
from home and
yeah. I mean,
sell an idea.
Yeah,
for a
well,
certain amount of
I guess I
money,
should say
whatever.
before that we hired Jamie Brew, who was a writer at large for the Onion, living in New York.
And a writer at large is sort of one step above a contributor. He
Yeah.
had been a writing fellow.
He had been a writing fellow, and
Like
I think
yourself.
after that did such a good job that they wanted to keep getting his drafts and his headlines. They were so good. And so then he went to New York, and while he was doing that, he would submit once a week headlines.
And the Onion is based in Chicago at that
Yes,
point.
yes. Boy, a lot of background to be
There's a lot of background. The Onion moved to Chicago around 2012, I want to say.
Yes.
So you started in New York. Now, when Clickhole starts, you're in Chicago.
Yes.
But you're looking at people all over. You're not necessarily looking at local Chicago writers.
Totally, yeah. And so we got him from the Onion, and then we, went to the pool of, people just to see who can we get, who's good. We kind of gave them. We also didn't know what we wanted exactly the submission packet to be, so we kind of loosely came up with what some of the formats on the site, what kind of the content types would be. So we were like, well, we want to do some sort of articles. We definitely want to do listicles. We want to do quizzes. So we came up with headlines for that, like a very small group of us here. And then we said, okay, let's see what people come up with. And through that, it's almost like the site didn't have its voice yet, but it's almost like through the contributor applications, we were like, okay, this is the kind of direction that would be good. This direction, not so much. So it must have been really hard for a contributor to pitch totally blind. but maybe also fun and freeing. I don't know.
Yeah, apparently that happens with new shows. I know it happened on Colbert. They got submissions, and those submissions helped them kind of formulate or at least hone the voice of the show.
Yeah, the direction you want to go in.
Yeah, because you find something funny. It's like, oh yeah, we're doing that.
Yeah.
Because that's funny.
Right.
Awesome. Any great discoveries from there? People that kind of blew you away or came from left field or?
Yeah, I mean, all of our writers, I'm just like totally blown away and impressed by. We really got a great group early on. We had Adam Levine, who was a contributor for The Onion. We had Noah Prestwich, I believe is his last. I always go to Prestwich and Prestwick. I believe it's Prestwich. He was just a student at Brown University who had a great pack. I think he'd done sketch and County of Four. Matt Powers, who was previously a writing fellow, a contributor at The Onion, an intern, and he worked he'd done some stuff with O&N, been a writer's assistant, and he had a really good packet. And then we had Steve Etheridge, who was a writing fellow at The Onion.
Right.
So we just had like a good group to start with, and then kind of built it out from there.
And now, does it kind of have a pool of freelancers beyond the core full-time writing staff, much like The Onion does?
Yeah, exactly. It has we have similarly, just people that email in ideas, because you have to get ideas from so many different places, and we have a bigger staff now. We have like 8 people that are writing for us.
Those are full-time staffers.
Full-time staffers, yeah. So, which is crazy. But it's good. We can, produce the kind of stuff that we're excited about, which was weird because it started off, I always think about with like 3 people in a room, like just trying to figure out what this is going to be good. What is this going to be?
So is the process different on Clickhole than it was at The Onion, where the headline is thought up and then those are pitched, and then if people like it, you sort of decide, okay, how are we going to execute this headline? Is it going to be a story? Is it going to be a news in brief, small thing? Is it going to be a picture with a headline or whatever? Or is there kind of a whole different process?
The process is different only because there's so many different content types at Clickhole. And at The Onion, you kind of have the headline, and the headline can be, let's make this a longer thing, and let's make it a shorter article. It's 2 things that it can be. Mm-hmm. Here, or let's just do a headline and a picture. That also happens. With Clickhole, you have, do we want it to be a list? Do we want it to be 10 things that, and then that's one pitch. And then you have articles. Do we want it to be an article? Then it's a totally different pitch. Quizzes, totally different pitch. So it's just, there's so many different formats that we don't do the thing where people read their ideas out loud. We put them all on a list and people read them, partially because a lot of times we'll have a totally straight headline and then there'll be a weird joke that occurs in it. Like one I can think of is 5 signs he's cheating on you. And then it's a total normal headline. And then the signs in the article are all really weird and absurd, like signs, like ominous signs that you would see, like the claws of a bear or on a rock, and like right. Moss is growing on it. And so it's weird things like that. And so that's like hard to get in a headline. You have to kind of read that in a parentheses where the writer's going, all right, so here's the thing.
The headline, then a parentheses explaining the joke.
Yeah, and sometimes we also have a headline that's all there. So
sure.
we kind of go back and forth.
And do you take submissions? Do people send stuff all the time? They email stuff, and do you look at those, or what's the deal there?
Same thing with The Onion. People submit things constantly. It's just really hard to read all of them. Every once in a while, someone will get lucky, and I'll look at something, but chances are very, very slim.
Is there anyone vetting that stuff, like an intern looking at all and then passing you the stuff that they think has merit?
Yeah, no.
Not yet.
Yeah, not yet. There's just not enough, just like not enough resources for that to be summed up, which sucks. But, usually that stuff is not great, to be perfectly honest. But,
yeah, no, it's, again, like even if a professional has 90% crap, an amateur probably has a little bit higher percentage of crap than that.
Yes.
So when you came on as a fellow, did you have any idea of how difficult or how competitive it was to get that fellowship?
I was very excited when I got it because I assumed it was difficult and competitive, and I think it was. I think a lot of people apply for that sort of thing. I think they send it out to all of the humor publications across the country. So yeah, I don't know the exact number of applications, but I'm guessing it was hard. Yeah, so I felt very good.
Yeah, that must have felt good.
Yeah.
And where had you come from?
So I was at the University of Texas when I applied,
Austin?
In Austin, Texas. And I was working for the Texas Travesty, which was like our version, the University of Texas's version of The Onion.
I've heard of it.
Yeah, and so it's a really great paper, and it's actually kind of been in the news recently because we would always run fake candidates during the student elections, and then this time they ran fake candidates and they got elected, so which is crazy.
That'll happen.
Yeah.
Got to be careful with that satire sometimes.
Yeah. But that's where I came from. I had a lot of practice writing in the fake Onion voice in college, which is a weird thing to have practice in college.
Well, it's getting more common now because I think almost every college has a fake or an Onion sort of.
Yeah, which is amazing. It's incredible that that's kind of the form of
the default form.
Yeah.
Which, it makes it so interesting that Clickhole would happen, that you guys would recognize, hey, this is a different voice. Like, did you ever wonder, like, why didn't anyone else think of this? Like, why are we the first ones to be doing this? Or did somebody do it first? And are there competitors?
As far as I know, there aren't competitors. I don't know. I don't know why people hadn't thought of it first. I mean, maybe someone had done it and it just didn't have quite the, it's really
the resources.
Quite the resources, and it was really great that we were able to latch onto The Onion and have The Onion promote us and say, hey, check out this thing. And much to people really didn't like that early on Facebook,
Sure.
and I'm sure people still don't. But
and it was actually panned early on. I remember there was a lot of negative criticism that came out.
Yeah, I think a thing that people said a lot early on was like, it feels like by parodying clickbait, they're doing clickbait again.
Yeah, or there's one note, which is a common criticism you would hear about The Onion as well.
Right, and I think what was weird to me was that sometimes things would be there was also a lot of glowing reviews early on. Some people really did like it right from the get-go, which was surprising to me.
I feel like there've been more lately, but
yeah, for sure. But I think the one thing that even in those glowing reviews, they would say, but it seems one note. Yeah.
See if they can keep it up longer than 2 weeks.
Right.
Yeah.
So that was always weird, strange to me.
Right.
It's like, all right, we'll give it a shot.
Yeah, no, it's funny as many times as people say that humor that's in a very tight parody format that it has to, copy with great verisimilitude, they often think that it's going to be, they often think that people are going to get tired of it or it's going to be hard to sustain or whatever. But The Onion's been doing it more than a quarter century.
Yeah.
I don't see why Clickhole would have to stop because it can continue to evolve as long as that media evolves. Do you like having that kind of restricted parameter on your humor, or do you feel like you wish you could just bust it open and do whatever you want?
Honestly, coming from The Onion, it almost felt like this was a little less restrictive.
You were bursting open.
I felt that way, but I don't even feel like The Onion is restrictive. It's just that it's just that when you're doing, like I said, we have two content types. You have like an article and a shorter article.
Well, there's also the op-ed.
Right, that's right. I was
other,
There's infographics. There are tons of ways to get jokes out.
But primarily, you're right. It's the news voice, and it's a very restrictive format for the parody.
Right,
and that can be suffocating.
Yeah, and so when you had these like weird formats where you can have quizzes and it's just different ways of getting the joke across, where you could have someone click a bunch of buttons and then you get different results every time. That does feel weirdly freeing. But I think similar to The Onion, to me, the media criticism is like a very small part of what we do. It's kind of in the way the website looks. It's the way that the article reads. It's the way that it's the voice. But I feel like the stuff that it's commenting on, again, just like The Onion, is sort of just stuff that exists in the world and like things that you experience in everyday life. So I always wanted it to be like that. That's something I always really admired about The Onion, is that like it makes fun of it. You can tell any joke you want to tell in this news voice. And it sounds amazing because it's in this like very hard news voice. And so I wanted Clickhole to be the same way, where you could tell sort of any joke you want in this, as long as you fit it in one of these formats.
Right. To the end reader, I feel like Clickhole does feel more free because, you're right, it has more templates, but it also sort of feels like it's these writers who, many of whom have written for The Onion and have had to adhere to this strict news voice, are now free to make crazy stuff up that doesn't adhere to that voice. And you can almost see or feel that sense of a creative person saying, I'm free, I'm just going to go crazy here. Because a lot of it does go crazy. Sometimes you feel like you're going to start reading a short story or a play, or you really just don't know like what you're going to get, which is a quality that The Onion doesn't really have, at least in the news stories.
Yeah.
And really, even in like the op-eds or anything else, we kind of know that format.
Yeah.
And that, it's so imitated now, obviously.
Right.
So you haven't even seen any imitators since Clickhole?
I think there are a couple of sites that are doing similar things. Like I think Funny or Die has like a news site that I think they also have. I think it's kind of in both worlds of like The Onion a little bit and also some Clickhole stuff. I even think that BuzzFeed is sort of dipping their feet a little bit more into comedy as well. Like some of their stuff has become more, some of their listicles are a little more parody oriented, and sometimes I think they might even be launching a whole comedy section, or maybe they already have. I don't know.
Huffington Post, you mean, or BuzzFeed?
BuzzFeed.
Yeah, because HuffPo has comedy. I think if BuzzFeed started comedy, I'm going to boldly predict if they do that, it's not going to parody the form in the way that Clickhole does. Mm-hmm. I think that's something that's in the DNA of people from The Onion. Sure. That the form is the function. So if you're in a format, you have to be commenting on or parodying. Not parodying, satirizing. You have to be satirizing that format.
Yeah.
And so, like you said, at first, Clickhole was a lot of just breaking free and trying stuff, and people were worried that this isn't sustainable or whatever. But over time, if you get enough smart people in a room, smart, funny people coming up with jokes, they're going to get tired of just funny jokes, and ultimately they're going to get satirical with it.
Right.
So a little bit of satire has crept into Clickhole over time, which is great, and I'm excited to see where that goes. Mm-hmm. But you just said a moment ago that you're not purposefully trying to do that. But I appreciate that, because I think that's what a comedy writer should do. They should just do what they think is funny.
Yeah. I
think the satire will find its way in mm-hmm. time. Is that your philosophy as well?
Yeah, definitely. I think we have done satire on and off, kind of when it has called for it. I think we had a bunch of stuff last year during the Ferguson incident and the protests and stuff like that. We did some commentary on that. So we've been on and off with the like real capital S hard satire.
Satirizing current events or difficult to talk about.
Right. And it's also finding our place in a world with The Onion and existing alongside with The Onion in a place where people are following probably on like social media, The Onion and Clickhole. It has always felt kind of nice to have, you can get your like really hard commentary on the Republicans from The Onion, and then you can see this insane list on Clickhole.
Look how these, the best dressed protesters or whatever.
Yeah, just some silly thing. Yeah, and with some overlap, ideally on both sides, because it's amazing to me when The Onion does an incredibly silly article. I love that, and I love it when Clickhole does a great satirical piece that, like, in a way that we could only do that The Onion can't. So
yeah, well, the deeper satire I think going on is not of a specific current event,
right,
but it's of the internet culture and of the idea that we're all staring at these boxes all day, mm-hmm. clicking on things.
Totally.
And what that says about us as human beings, and what a flaw. I mean, because the best satire points out human foibles.
Right. And
that's a big one that
mm-hmm.
we're all suffering from right now, and I don't see that going away unless all the power goes out.
Yeah. That would be a fascinating scenario.
Yeah. How would Clickhole cover that, I wonder?
Yeah.
So when you're in the writer's room and you're coming up with ideas, because you have so many templates, do you kind of assign, like, okay, do 5 quizzes, do 5 listicles, or do you just let people come up with whatever they want and you'll see what happens?
We let people come up with whatever they want. Every once in a while, it hasn't happened in a long time, we'll be like, we're really running low on lists. We're really running low on blogs, because we have, like, our version of the Onion op-ed was like just people writing blog posts. It's a shameless ripoff of the Onion op-ed, but yeah. So sometimes we need just more or less of one of those. So sometimes we'll do that, but
and then the process then after they come up with those headlines, do you let people write their own headline or their own idea, or do you assign it to somebody different who you think is going to be the best for it?
People get to pick what they write, similar to The Onion, where sometimes someone will do their own headline, sometimes someone will do someone else's headline. It's always nice when the writer gets to execute their own joke, but it always feels like by the end of it, we brainstorm it in the room, and people are pitching jokes all over the place. It really does feel very collaborative in that almost... different writers will it'll turn out different ways for sure. But it feels so collaborative enough to where like almost anyone who writes it will do a really solid job on your headline. And I think the writers are pretty trusting with each other.
That's great.
Jokes, yeah.
And I noticed like in some of those templates that have the slideshow that has like a story, like a make your own story sort of thing.
The Click Ventures, yeah.
Click Ventures.
Choose your own adventures, yeah.
One thing I noticed about those that I found really interesting was you're toying with dramatic structure, but ultimately everything on Clickhole has comedic structure. In other words, it's all structured like a sketch. Mm-hmm. It's a short little escalated joke to a button at the end. Yeah. That's it. Right. There's never any actual dramatic structure going on. Did I miss one? Could that ever happen? By dramatic structure, I mean something like, a Woody Allen short story where there's actually a beginning, middle, and end, and there's characters that you have empathy with and stuff like that.
Yeah, I think just because of the timeline on some of these things, it's kind of hard to build in a lot of that, like go that in depth into something. Oh, I'm sure we would love to do that, and maybe we will someday.
But even like a joke, remember jokes?
Yes.
Like when people say, "I got a joke for you."
Yeah, yeah.
And they'd tell you a joke, and it was like, salesman pulls up to a farmer's house, or three nuns walk into a bar.
Yeah.
Those have dramatic structure because they're
right.
beginning, middle, and end.
True, yeah.
So you can do them short. You could do like a paragraph or whatever. But for some reason, like The Onion never did those, and I don't see those on Clickhole either. Is that a dying format? The idea of the dramatically structured humor piece.
I think it exists, and it can always exist, and just depends on the format, And I think some of our Click Ventures, if you play through them a certain way, you might get something. I think you might get a beginning, middle, and end. We have this thing going up today. I don't know. By the time this goes up, it'll be a couple of days ago or weeks ago. It's a Shakespearean tragedy in the Click Venture format. So it's essentially, it reads like a play. It's written in iambic pentameter. And you get to like play through it, and so I think if you play through it a certain way, you will get a full kind of arc, or you could get killed very early on.
Awesome.
So yeah, I think it is possible. I think it just depends on the format and the type, because short, I guess in a visual form it'll always exist, right? Like in movies and
yeah,
but in written pieces.
Well, for long form, anything that's like longer than 8 minutes,
right.
It has to have dramatic structure.
Yeah.
You're just not going to be interested. Otherwise, it's just going to be a painfully long SNL sketch.
This is true. Yes.
So, yeah, if somebody clicks long enough, maybe they get something like that. So, are you totally in the zone? Like, is this what you should be doing with your life? Is this like writing comedy and this type of comedy? Is this like...
Yeah, I think I hope so. I hope I'm doing the right thing. I've always really loved comedy, and I wanted to do it for a long time. So I feel really good about it, and I'm glad that it's at a place where the great thing about working on the internet and on something like Clickhole is that you get to think of an idea, and then you get to do the idea. There's like really not much of a middleman involved there. You get to work with the staff goes.
It's not that expensive. It's mostly like clip art or stock footage.
There's stock photos. You can do a quick shoot. We have graphics
you have
people.
A staff writer, and graphics people.
Yeah, who work really hard and are just like excited to help you out with their ideas. They're amazing at Photoshop. So you really like have amazing things at your disposal. We have a video team that's always ready to do something new and exciting.
No, it's a creative person's dream job.
Yeah.
Do you have influence from the business people? Like if a big ad is sold and you have to do like an ad integration or something, or is it purely creative for you?
There's always, sponsored content, but that's like kind of a separate thing for me. It feels like different than...
Do different people do that?
No, it's kind of done in tandem with the same team loosely, but there's very little interference from that side, except for... we have to run things through a certain process. If we're working on it with a brand, you don't want to always mention that certain brand in a thing unfavorably, which isn't always the best, and there are definitely fights that arise because of that. But in general, I would say very rarely have we not been able to do an idea for something like that, for a reason like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, the reason I asked if this was your thing, if you were totally in the zone or whatever, is because you seem like such an even keel guy, and not the sort of guy if you ran into on the street you would think, oh, that's a comedy writer.
Yeah, that's a
That
comedian
guy
for sure.
does jokes for a living.
Yeah.
Because you're very straight-laced and very gentle seeming, and just very normal seeming.
Yeah.
You're hyper normal. So I'm curious to know about your background, like how and why did you start getting interested in doing comedy, which goes back as far as college, as far as we know at this point, but what about before that?
So I didn't know I wanted to do comedy until college, but it's a weird thing where in like 5th grade and like even in like elementary school, I would draw like comics, I would draw cartoons. And I wanted nothing more than to be a cartoonist in life. And so I used to do that, and people would actually, like my classmates would really enjoy that in elementary school. And then I guess in 6th grade, that's much less cool and exciting. That's much less of a thing that people are excited. It's like a day to night thing where you come in and you're like, all right, people are excited about my new comic. And like, no one's excited about that anymore. So it kind of like that I think lay dormant for like 10 years after that, and then I think in college you kind of rediscover it when you start hanging out with, when you discover something like, oh, there's this Texas Travesty, this thing that does like The Onion. You start meeting like-minded people, and you start going to comedy shows, and it's really fun. And then you're like, oh, that's right. I used to be interested in this. This is me.
So before you were doing comics in 5th grade, what was your comedy history before that? Were you funny in the family? Were you, or did you have a torturous upbringing where you turned to comedy as a way to cope?
Definitely not a torturous upbringing, but I
wouldn't have guessed.
Yeah, I moved around a little bit as a kid. I actually didn't even come to America until I was like 8.
Where'd you come from?
So I was born in Dubai, and then my family moved to Saudi Arabia, and then Indonesia, and then Houston, Texas. Which is, the normal.
A lot of oil.
Yeah, a lot of oil. You can see the story.
Is one of your parents in the oil business?
Yes, my father is. And so
Okay.
we moved around a lot because of that. And so, but then we stayed in Houston after it, because I was always like, we're probably going to move again. This is,
How old were you when all this was happening?
This was I was born all the way through 8 years old. So just a lot in that early period that you don't really remember that much of. But I do remember a lot of like, you'd become friends with some kid and you'd be like, oh, this is good. And then they'd be
We're
all
moving.
over. Yeah. And then, but then, after that, I got to have a normal upbringing in Sugar Land, Texas.
At age 8.
At age 8. And I got to have friends in the neighborhood, and that like was a consistent, like normal life.
But are your parents loaded then with oil money? Did you
They're
have it very easy.
I think they do well. They do pretty well. But I got to have things that I wanted as a kid. I had a very good upbringing and never had to. I never like wanted. It's kind of you would just get.
Right.
Yeah.
So
I was spoiled. Is what I'm saying.
did they spoil you, or did they make an effort to try to give you a normal?
I think they tried to give me a normal. They really weren't so rich that I could get.
Where did they come from? Were they Americans, nationals in Dubai, or what was their background?
They are from India. My parents are from
Okay.
India.
How did your dad get in the oil business?
He, I think
Engineer?
No, he's not an engineer. He's a finance guy.
Oh, okay.
So I think he went to Dubai sort of after college and I guess applied for this job and got
Okay.
it. Yeah. I don't really know what made him pursue it. I think it probably was just a well-paying job.
Great
It was
job,
good,
and-
and it allowed him to get out of India. I think that's like a lot of what you're doing when you're there. It's just trying to how can I get out of this
Get out.
place?
Did he have a poor upbringing in India?
I think he did. Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
Not
Rural?
very well off. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
And
Some
what
of the
about
stories
your
are crazy.
mom?
Same with her.
She was
Yeah.
from the same.
Yeah, I think her parents might have had a little more money because her dad would like work in Dubai sometimes too.
Dowries in India?
Yeah, I guess they do. My parents didn't have all that stuff, so it was a little. They had kind of they're like Catholic people, and so they have a much more like.
Were they Catholic in India?
Yeah, they're Catholic in
okay.
India. Yeah, there's like a very small community of Catholic Indians, And
I'm
so,
sure there's some percentage of everything. India is so huge.
yeah, and you're
But
so
you don't
big.
think
It's
of that.
everything. Yeah, yeah. There's Scientologists.
So did they know English in India?
Yeah, wait. So India's a crazy place where you go and people are just talking English. You go there and you're expecting like, all right, what is the language? No, everyone speaks English.
Everyone
It's
speaks
kind of
English.
cool. They all watch American TV shows. They
Okay.
like are all influenced by America. So and you know I think the English is kind of because of it was the England's colonization. So everyone speaks
Yeah.
English.
And did your mom work?
Yeah, she worked at Emirates, the airlines, the very nice
Okay. Yeah,
UAE
luxury
airlines.
air.
Yeah. So that's what she did.
And then what about in the States?
She worked as a teacher briefly, and then as a realtor now.
Okay.
So
What did she teach?
she teaches like just kindergarten kids, so just all over the place with kindergarten.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did you have any siblings?
Yeah, I have a younger sister named Amanda. Yeah.
Okay. That's it. How much younger?
She is about to be 21 years old.
Okay.
So yeah.
I don't know how old you are though.
I'm 26.
Okay.
So
5 years. That's pretty big.
Yeah, pretty big gap.
Growing
And
up.
with brother and sister, you know, it's that like I feel like that's like a different relationship. I mean, I think we're close now and we talk and stuff, but I think it's a very different relationship than what some people like when you see two sisters that are really close and like know everything about each other. It's like that's crazy to me.
But so your role in the family at home was not necessarily as the funny person or as the guy who released tension.
Yeah, I think I was sort of funny in the family. I was always funnier with friends of ours. Like when we would go to like family parties, I feel like I would be funny at those
Like
parties.
family or grown-up friends?
It's like my parents would have work friends, and then like people that lived in our neighborhood, and we'd all kind of hang out. And so I feel like I'd be funny in that group. I feel like I was funny amongst like my like friends that I had around in the neighborhood. We would go out and ride bikes and film little movies. I felt like I was.
How do those hold up?
Oh, they're amazing. We would make movies that were really dramatic. Like we would make movies that were like sci-fi movies that were very serious and
Firelight.
intense. They're so good because I'm glad we went that route, because I feel like if we were trying to be funny, they would not have been funny. But we made these serious movies, and we would inject. Like someone would just do like a silly thing because they couldn't control themselves. Like I couldn't control myself, so I would do something weird in the middle of a scene, and then they'd be like, "All right, we'll keep this in, just one thing, but no more." And then someone else will do something, and so the movies just feel very off and weird.
That's so interesting though, because in good comedy, I feel like most of it is the straight man,
Yeah,
and a very small percentage is the joke.
it's true. Yeah.
And you seem to get that intuitively, like doing these really serious movies and then knowing that if we just put one or two funny things in there, they'll be really funny.
I would love to tell you that this was intentional and that we were comedic geniuses.
Yeah, I didn't think it
Yeah, no, but we really were like,
was
let's just do this.
Yeah,
crazy.
and it was
Yeah.
instinctive.
I know.
And then did you keep that up? Keep making movies like as you got older?
I think we did it in middle school and then a little bit in high school, but then everyone just got really busy in high school with work and just our movies were so silly. We'd be wearing like towels and stuff and like as like capes, and we'd make swords out of little paper towel things. It was just like you got to a point where that would be embarrassing to be doing in high school. Like it's not a
Absolutely.
thing to be doing. So we didn't. We stopped. Probably with good reason. And then, a little bit in college with the travesty, we were getting into video very slightly. So experimented with it there. But that was always
perhaps
fun.
a few more resources or at least people.
Yeah, and and that is more seriously like let's make a comedy thing, and so,
Right.
which is a different approach to it.
Right.
Let's take this seriously as a comedy.
Because they probably had a website when you were there.
Yes.
And
yeah.
it was at a time when the bandwidth was such that you could do video as well.
Yeah, put it up on YouTube and lots of people would see it. So
Yeah.
we did that. Did a little bit of that.
And you went to a private high school.
Yes.
The high school immortalized in the movie Rushmore, correct?
No, that's a different school. That's St. John's. I went to Strake Jesuit. Very similar schools. I wish I went to the Rushmore High School. But they're both all boys.
I had it in my head that you had gone to that school.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know where.
But I guess
maybe I lied.
the fact that you went to a similar school
went to a
in
similar school.
a similar area.
Yeah, in Houston.
Close.
Both in Houston. Rival schools. Yeah.
Houston, yeah.
Yeah,
So-
both all boys schools though. Yeah.
Yeah. Comedy and satire and the sort of the way that it's being done at Clickhole I feel like is very much like a first world side effect.
Yeah.
You know, it's like people who have the internet and have access to media of all sorts find a way to parody it in a way that somebody who has more pressing concerns can't.
Definitely, yeah.
It's like, you know, people used to say, you know, yes, England was a terrible oppressor of, you know, the Indians, for example, but we wouldn't have had Dickens. You know, we wouldn't have had, you know what I mean?
Yes.
Like that sort of strata of privilege produces people who have the time to think about
It's true, yeah.
satire and intellectual pursuits like that.
Yeah, it's definitely not that important. Like,
But I'm guessing you
question.
met other people of like mind at that school because it was a private school, and maybe these were a lot of like oil money people
Yes.
or political, you know, children or any stuff like that might have been pretty interesting, and maybe you found a lot of like-minded people.
I found a certain amount of like-minded people, but I didn't have that many friends, honestly, in high school. It was a little bit of an awkward period, but yeah, you latch on to certain people, and you're like, oh, these people are funny and kind of like me. But yeah, no one interested in comedy at all, for whatever reason. And it was, and I think that's probably why it eluded me until college to where I was like, oh, this is the thing I want to do. Yeah, but I mean, yeah, there were nice guys there, and it was always funny because I feel like in middle school, I feel like when it's a co-ed environment, you constantly, I feel like there's a certain attempt to impress the other gender.
Yeah, you're
and
constantly like courting.
Yeah.
Essentially,
true. And so-
you're doing mating rituals like
I know, nonstop.
99% of your time.
And so in high school, when you're just all boys, I felt like people were a little looser and people were would do sillier things and goofier things and just kind of weirder things. So that was funny. And that was always fascinating to me and felt like an interesting, weird fraternity experience.
It's a weird environment. I never thought about it. I didn't go to one, like an
Yeah.
all-boys situation, but it's so unnatural.
It's strange. Yeah, it's very strange. And then like going into college after that, you're like, oh, right. Okay. Girls. Right. All right. And we had an all-girls school across the street. And I remember early on, people would like to hang out there and go like, all right, let's hang out with the girls. And then towards the end, like the last couple of years, I remember people would like not go there during lunch and stuff and be like, let's just hang out here.
Was there an active and overt like homosexual culture in the high school?
No, it was a Catholic school, and especially during that
was
time,
frowned on
it was
by
very
the
frowned
authorities.
on. Yeah, it was. I mean, not like openly, you know, but I think it was. Yeah, it was not a thing that people talked about or did. And only senior year we had these retreats that people would go on, and people would go up and talk and share their deepest feelings, and some people came out of the closet during those things, and that was really cool. Where it wasn't that many people; it was probably like one or two kids, and people were accepting and nice about it, and no one was mean and bullying. Which
That's
I really
the
liked.
modern age for you.
Yeah, I really like that could happen at like a Catholic school.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
What's your hope for Clickhole moving forward?
I want to keep experimenting and keep just evolving, like you said earlier, evolving with the medium. The internet's going to constantly be throwing new things at audiences, and we want to evolve with that. For me, it's just like I don't want the site to be boring. I never want it to be a place where people go and feel like, all right, I know what I'm going to get here. I know the exact type of style, which is a danger of happening no matter what. No matter what type of comedy you're doing, it could happen. And it's not a TV show where you're gone for the summer or it'll be 5 seasons and you're done.
Treadmill.
It's perpetual. And so we want to keep being exciting. We keep trying new format, like content types, like the Click Ventures were an exciting thing. We did oral histories recently, which is a thing that was happening on sites like Vulture and just other things. Their sites were doing oral histories, AV Club even, and we felt like, oh, that's something that we would do fake oral histories. That'd be amazing. And so we started doing that. So yeah, just continue evolving.
And what about you personally? Like recently, a lot of the Onion staff was, I don't know what the right word, not pilfered, but a lot of the Onion staff was hired by the new Colbert Show.
Right, they betrayed the Onion. They turned their backs on satire and comedy. Yes.
Yeah. No, I'm sure they're going to be doing great satirical work for Stephen.
Mm-hmm.
But do you have grander aspirations for your own comedy career? Because you're a very young guy, and you've had great success so far. Like, what are some of the big comedy goals that you have?
Yeah, I mean, I think it would be really great to someday write for a TV show or something like that. I'm very open to opportunities, but I want it to be the right thing. I don't want to leave for just anything because, like we said earlier, this is one of the few places where you get to put out exactly what you want to put out. You think of something, it gets to go up. So I won't leave this place very easily. It'll be a little hard, but I mean, for the right opportunity, I'm sure I would if people are listening. The right amount of money. But yeah, it's kind of just based on. I also think at some point it'll kind of feel right. It'll feel like, okay, I think it's time to, let this go and let new people.
Yeah, like after you maybe feel like you've done what you can do, and maybe there are other people who are ready to step into your role.
Yeah, and I think that will also help the website evolve. You know what I mean? Like I think
Sure.
Clickhole, it'll change with editors. It'll change with new people. I think that's important for it. I think it'll at some point I should get the hell out of here.
Yeah, no, it's a lot of people's first job in comedy is The Onion. I assume Clickhole as well. It's very young people, and they're here for a few years and they usually move on, which totally makes sense. But I'm sure you've heard from people who've left, and I've heard this as well, that you never have that same creative freedom again, because anytime you work on a TV show or anything else, it's just a lot more strict.
Yeah.
As far as, oh no, you can't do that. Oh no, we can't. No, we can't do that.
Yeah.
There's just a lot more of that. And people always think back to their time at The Onion. I'm sure they'll think of Clickhole the same way, like, oh, those days were magic.
100%. It's also a weird world where now, like, people on TV are kind of doing stuff for the internet.
Right.
Like, it feels like things are shorter,
They're
clippier, and
merging.
So that's also fascinating. It feels like a fascinating time if your goal is to try and get into TV, to then be producing web content for the web again. So it seems like a time to kind of be watching the trends and to figure out, like, well, which is actually the place to move on to, and
Yeah.
where do you want to be?
Yeah, because if you wait long enough, like, I don't watch TV anymore. I watch the internet.
No, not at all.
Everything's on the internet.
Yeah.
So if you're working in the internet, maybe you've already made it to the top of the heap in terms of.
There are also shows that are coming out on like PlayStation now. It's crazy. So it's like
outrageous.
I don't know what's next or what happened. Will we injecting TV at some point? I don't know.
Yeah, I'm sure whatever happens, you will face it with absolute normalcy.
I hope so.
All right. Well, it's great talking to you, Jermaine.
Yeah. Thank you, Scott.
Scott Dickers here. Thanks for listening to the How to Write Funny podcast. For more great interviews and lots of other resources for comedy writers, visit howtowritefunny.com.